From the deepest data mines of New Eden, please put your hands together for CCP Bjorn and CCP Estimate.
Mic doesn't.
Turn on mic.
Hello, 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 hello.
Yeah, the front right.
Hello, hello, hello. Does it work now? Is it working? Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fanfest. I am.
Yeah, that's where we're going now.
I am CCP Estimate, data scientist here at CCP. I've been and a part of the analytics department. The analytics department has been part of CCP ever since CCP hired a doctor in economics to monitor the health of the economy. And the crown jewel of the data department has always been the economic report. So I'm going to take you through a brief history of the report. The origin of the report dates back to 2007, when we released the quarterly economic newsletters, which were a few-page reports with detailed descriptions on the state of the economy. I'm not sure how many of you remember these reports, but we in the data department, we are lucky to have CCP Recurve still with us, who keeps printed versions of these reports at his desk. These reports, they showed the development of the economy, some graphs showing, for example, the wealth distribution, the mineral price indexes, the TAC2 module prices, and differences in prices between regions. We, however, stopped releasing these reports in 2010, after releasing about 14 of those, because it took so long to create one of these reports. It wasn't until 5 years later that we created something similar, which was in EVEOnline, where we introduced the monthly economic report. The report was written in R, using ggplot2 to create the visualizations. And over the next 4 years, it got more and more difficult to maintain these reports. As you can see on this chart, the average release date of the reports went from 4th of the month all the way to 12th of the month in 2019. Foreseeing the difficulty of running these reports, we decided in 2020 to start a full rewrite of the reports. We wanted to replace R with Python and align data sources with the new data pipelines that were being built. The first 3 Python-generated charts were introduced in 2021, and the final transformation was completed in 2022. During the process, we removed 12 graphs and added 8 mining graphs, which we thought was a better indicator of the health of the economy. As you can see, there was a significant improvement in the release of the MER after we finished the transformation. And now we plan to release this report in the first few days of the month, similar to what it was back in 2016. The latest additions to the MER have been dark mode charts, warm mode statistics, LP by region, battle statistics, and ESS numbers. And today, we have released more than 2,900 graphs through the MER. This figure shows all of those charts. The blue ones represent Python R-generated graphs, while the yellow ones represent Python-generated graphs. And occasionally, graphs didn't make it to the release, and those are represented as empty boxes. Some have stayed in the MER the whole time, and one of which is the production, destruction, and mining graph, which we can see here on the animation, how it has evolved over the years. We have changed the coloring a bit. We changed some minor details in the graph and added some annotations. And then in 2022, when we finished the Python transformation, we added dark mode versions and then some details on security band. The latest additions, as I said earlier, were mining charts, ESS, battles, and wormholes. And to create one of these graphs in the MER, we are using the Plotly graphing library. And it is quite the iteration of going through and iterating and trying to get the design to look up to the standards required for to be released. This animation that's playing on the screen is showing one of those iterations where we are creating the wormhole flowchart, where we wanted to visualize how items move through wormhole space. But even though I think this visualization looks great at the end, some CSM members thought this could be summarized with a pie chart. So we had to fix this. I wonder if the CSM member was just trying to get me to put one of these summarization charts. It was at least yeah. But the mayor has changed quite a bit over the years, but by no means is it perfect. Item pricing, for example, is one thing that we need to work on. There are multiple sources of truth for pricing an item in EVE. We can use CCP kill mill pricing, we can use set killboard pricing, we can use manufacturing costs, and average market prices. And various charts in the MER use different prices, so we wanna fix that. With growing significance of factional warfare, we want to add some more details on factional warfare, so you can see how many loyalty points are being generated. Ultimately, we would like other people to be able to recreate the graphs that we are creating in the MER, so we would want to improve the data sources, and perhaps open source some of the code that is used to generate the graphs. Ultimately, or of course, we just want to add more charts to the MER. We want to add something that keeps the monthly economic report interesting, and keeps the conversation going around the economy. In the past, we have added some extra charts to the MER that were not meant to be permanent, but more thought of as a good addition every now and then. And one of those charts is the cumulative wealth distribution. And every time we post one of these, we get questions. What defines space rich? What is needed to be part of the 1% in EVEOnline? And when I was reading through the 2007 quarterly economic newsletters, I noticed that we showed this data back then. So I looked in the database, and believe it or not, we have nearly 20 years of wealth distribution data. So on the screen is the wealth distribution in EVEOnline, all wallet ISK, so only ISK balance. Per account, and back in 2004, the average or mean account had about 35 million ISK in their wallets, and the top 1% had 43 billion. This changed quite a bit over the years. In 2010, it was about 200 million, and in 2023, today, it's about 630 million ISK. The top 1%, however, is holding about 123 billion ISK in their wallets. And as you can see in this one, where we're visualizing the top 1%, you can see that the top 1%, their wealth increased, or their wallet ISK doubled between 2014 and 2018 from 60 billion to 120 billion. But I know what you're all asking now. This is only ISK balance. What about total wealth? Well, this figure shows the distribution of total wealth for all, where we include ISK, items, and plex. And to keep the consistency, we're still only looking at accounts, so up to 3 carders. The mean wealth is about 4.9 billion, and the top 1% is sitting at 100 billion worth of assets. But we can do better than that. We know that most EVE players, they have more than one account. So let's look at the wealth distribution for all EVE players. Accumulation of all their accounts, all players. So here things change quite a bit. The mean account, mean EVE carder or EVE player, has about 9 billion worth of assets, while the average is about 42 billion. The top 5% has a net worth of 168 billion. The top 1% has a little below half a trillion worth of assets. The top 0.1% has a staggering 1.9 trillion. And the top 0.01% has at least 6.5 trillion worth of assets. But keep in mind, the average age of these accounts is 12 years. So now I'm going to hand the mic over to CCP Björn, who's going to continue with these interesting statistics on all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, CCP Estimate. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fanfest. Now let's dive straight back into some more numbers. 25,969,962. Any guesses to what this number refers to? You're very close. Total number of accounts, I heard. This is the total number of characters created since May 6, 2003. Every character ever created. Now, this is roughly equivalent to the current population of Australia, which is good. Now, this comes down to roughly 1.2 million characters created every year, 3,500 characters created every day, and that equates to the birth rate of Turkey. That's good. And 2.36 characters added to the meat grinder every minute of every day, which is a staggeringly high number, even though it's small. Now, this is the total split between the empires, or the races. As you can see, Kaldari comes out on top with 33% of all characters created, Galente in second place, and Minmatar and Amarr are fairly even, with roughly 18%. Now, this is the split between the bloodlines, and interestingly, Galente comes out on top as the most preferred bloodline out of all of them. However, it's probably better to visualize this throughout time. And even though this tells you something, it's even better to see it if you contrast it next to one another and overlay it. And what's interesting here, for instance, is that you can see that Kaldari used to be the most popular up until 2011, roughly, 2010. Then, up until 2018, Galente took over as the favorite. You can see the huge spike in the picture there is when EVE went free to play. But yeah, then in 2018, Kaldari took over again, while Amarr and Minmatar have been relatively similar throughout the entire period. Now, this is the 20-year anniversary of EVEOnline, so we in the data team naturally thought to ourselves, how much 20-year-old data do we have? Or better yet, what data exists without gaps from 2003, May 2003. Now, there isn't a lot, but there is still some. We have character creations, we have user account creations, corporation membership records, alliance membership records, office rentals, formal war declarations, roles granted to corporation members, online player count, cumulative logon duration for users, and sales data. And one of the, there is of course more, but this is probably the most shareable and interesting data points. And one of the data points that really piqued my interest when I was looking into this was date of birth. Now, it's something that we've been collecting since 2003. It used to be a registration requirement all the way up to 2016 when we pulled it out to streamline the registration process. And then up until this year, we allowed it as an optional entry point on the account management page. When we removed it entirely, because it wasn't really that used. And the reason why it's not that much used is, of course, because it's player entered, it's prone to error, you can just submit whatever you want, and there's no way for us to validate if the date of birth you enter is actually correct. But still, a very common question we get in analytics is how old is what's the average age of an EVE player? And it's also a fun way to see how analytics work. And now, usually when you start, or often when you start plotting data, it looks like this, like absolute trash. And thank you for this. But yeah, we have a date range from 1750 all the way to today. The most recent birth date we have in our system is September 11th, 2023, so 11 days ago. So something is very wrong here. And we can just, if you know nothing about the issue, you can just start by saying, okay, the oldest player was probably not more than 100 when the game was released, so you can limit the axis to 1903. Still something very wrong. There's like one day there that triumphs all the rest. And if you knew nothing, it would be hard to analyze this data because the date is January 1st, 1978. So you're just like, why is that happening? So you have to know something. You have to speak to some people at CCP, some gurus that know something. And it turns out that January 1st, 1978 was the default date in the date of birth field. So if you just entered, press submit, that was the date of birth you got. Not the best default value, if you think about it, but there you go. So we remove that, and you start to get something going on in the picture. Still, it's kind of wrong. So you might see like what's happening with all these peaks. Why are there these days that kind of pop up way over the rest? And it turns out these are all January 1st. So like if people were even bothered to edit anything in the date of birth field, they just edited the year. They didn't bother changing the date. So just to kind of see better what's going on, we can remove these. But it's still kind of shitty. So we can just try to look at the distribution from like where it roughly starts and where it roughly ends. So we can filter the period down to 1953 to 2010. Still not great. We can check out some of these kind of peaks, see what's happening. February 2nd is also a super popular date. So like if you edit the date, you edit it to 2 and 2 from 1 and 1. And the first 5 days in a month are also very kind of disproportionately popular, given that date of birth should randomly distribute. But perhaps not enough to remove them as outliers, so we just keep them. Like if you have issues with individual dates, the best way to fix that is probably just to group by month. That's a great way to fix kind of the errors that you have on individual dates. And here we're starting to see something that's starting to look like a probability distribution you can probably work with a little. You can also tell yourself like you're not really interested in which month you're born in. You might be interested in the year. So you can just group by that instead, and you can see an even clearer picture of what's happening. And then you can also tell yourself, like, I'm not really interested if a player is like 23, 24, 25, but I'm interested in if he's in his 20s or 30s or 40s, 50s. So you can group by age groups instead. So you have like a decade-long age group thing happening. Now this is probably too complex for people to read, so you simplify it into nice bars, you slap some percentages on top, and there you have the EVE player age distribution. 50% between 30 and 40, 25% between 40 and 50, and the rest is distributed between the other buckets. Now, it's very likely that we have some error here because we removed this field as a registration requirement in 2016, and we no longer provide the option to add it anywhere. So you can always argue that the most recent players are probably younger on average. But there you go. Another fun data point you get from user account creation is the country that the account was registered in. Now, personally, I don't think this is the most interesting data point because the United States makes up 25% of our active player base. So they always triumph in every statistics where you look at countries. But what is interesting is that the US was not always on top. For 2 days, like the first day EVE came out and the second day EVE came out, the UK was #1. Give them a round of applause. And perhaps more interestingly, Iceland was #2 for a day. Probably our greatest achievement after coming in second at the team handball in the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And here you can see the trajectory of what's happening. Starts off slowly, you can see Iceland trickling down the list. But also a massive achievement. We stayed in the top 20 up until 2007-8. Roughly. And then it just goes up pretty fast. You can see the other countries kind of taking over. And there you go. Now, the top 20 countries, to me at least, are not that interesting, but the bottom 20, that's interesting. Shout out to the 2 users created in St. Helena Ascension and Tristan da Cunha. I don't even barely know what that is, but there you go. Also very interesting about this is that Antarctica doesn't even make the bottom 20. 438 user accounts have been created in Antarctica, which is crazy. But war declarations. The first formal war declaration was declared on May 16th at 7 o'clock in 2003. There have been 732,000 wars declared in total. 208 of them are currently active. And the longest standing war in EVE's history was between the Bad Goristas Corporation and the Headhunters. It was declared on May 23rd, 2005, and retracted on February 13th, 2019, which comes down to 13 years and 268 days. Yes, sir. Now, these are all the awards that have been declared in EVEOnline, grouped by month and colored by year. However, these are all awards that included active kills. So, I don't know if you can really call them wars, but we didn't start linking wars to PvP kills until 2011, so that's why you don't see anything before that time. But this obviously is not a big part of daily PvP activity. Only 589 kills on average per day are linked to wars, formally declared wars, that is, which is less than 3% of total daily PvP kills. Office rentals, there are 69 currently active office rentals. Yes, it's a great number, that are 20+ years old. More interestingly, 45% of these belong to the Playboy enterprises of the Dark Taboo Alliance. I couldn't make this up if I wanted to. So yeah, there are 122,000 roughly currently active office rentals. The highest current office rental price is, perhaps not surprisingly, in GTA 4.4 at around 20 billion-ish per month. So if you want to impress the in-laws, you know where to rent an office. These are the top 3 stations by currently active office rental agreements, the top 3 systems, the top 3 corporations, the top 3 alliances, and the count by security band. Well, there you go. Another huge number. 4 billion roughly this time. Any guesses? Kills? Yeah, not a bad guess, but no. This is the total hours of cumulative log-on time for every user account ever in EVE. And this comes down to 460,000 years of log-on time. That is quite something. Give yourself a round of applause. Much smaller number, but related to the one we saw earlier. Oh, average, I heard, yes. This is the average for every user account. Take all accounts, their total log-on duration, and average it. This might not seem like much, but this is super high. This includes every account that has no log-on time, 0, which there are some, believe it or not. Of course, your average, everyone in this room and their accounts, is a lot higher. A lot. Again, this is an average. Averages are skewed, so this is insanely high. A very small number, 18. Any guesses? Hours per day? No. I was waiting for some obscenities while asking for suggestions on this, but I'll give you a hint. 18 for 20. 20 years, maybe, another hint. 2 are here at Fanfest. I heard it. I heard it in the audience. 18 user accounts have been continuously subscribed without a day's break for more than 20 years. And 2 of the account owners are at Fanfest. So Psychic Sue and Karsten, the 4th and 13th longest running subs currently, 20.4 and 20.3 years, without a day's break. Not a day. Like, the poor people that went on vacation for a few days, they're not on the list because there's just no breaks. And a special shout out to Heavy Hauler, also at Fanfest. He is at 19.8 years with the 21st. Sorry? Okay, some error in the data apparently, but But yeah, here are the 18, subbed for 20+. Round of applause to these guys. This is amazing. Amazing. 384, anybody familiar? Flyable ships in EVEOnline. And here you have all of them. Bars indicating total quantity of active characters in a snapshot taken on September 9th last. It's on a logarithmic scale, so you better visualize the quantities, otherwise it looks like this, and you can barely see any differences between anything. So again, like active characters, having a login 30 days prior to the September 9th. That's the total quantity in the bars. And the coloring is an activity index. It's a combination of activations, ship activations on logon, ship changed into events, and gate jumps. So the dark green, much used ships, dark orange, barely no usage, and white is somewhere in between. And here you can see some examples. I hope you can read it. I can see the letters are a little small now. They were huge on my screen. There you go. You can see the Campion, for instance, at the lower right corner. 12 items in total quantity of active characters. No activations, no changed into events, and no gate jumps. Perhaps not surprisingly. Here you can see a few interesting shapes. Now these, there are kind of relatively a lot of, but they're not used a lot relative to their neighbors. So for instance, you can see the Miasmos Quave Ultra Edition. There are thousands of those, or 1,000, sorry, on active characters, but no activation event on that day, on September 9th. So it's not used at all, with 1,000 active ships in use, kind of. While you can see the Bantam, for instance, it's relatively much used. Of course, there are 220,000 items, but it's used more than its nearest neighbors in terms of quantity. Here you can see the opposite. So these are ships that are kind of rare relative to their neighbors, but used a lot, if that makes sense. So the Revenant, for instance, there are 110 of these for active players on September 9th, but they still have 28 activations on logon, which is kind of high. Now, these are the top 10s for total quantity on active characters. And these are the bottom 10. You can see the Armageddon Imperial issue and the Megathron Federation issue, only one active ship on active characters on September 9th. Now, these are not the only ships in EVEOnline. There are ships that I wouldn't say are rarer than these, but still you could maybe have a total item quantity within the game, not just on active accounts that only goes down to 1 or 2. So there are some items laying on dormant accounts. But I thought it was more interesting to show you the active inventory. Now, as you may have noticed, the Venture topped the list as the most or like highest quantity ship in the game for active accounts, but it also takes the cake when you look at the entire history of item or inventory counting, all the way back to September 2013. So if you take every day, sum up the entire inventory quantity for every day, it comes out on top. But this is not the only metric that it wins in. It's also the highest in market quantity, all the way through history. Also the highest in stack quantity, so like stacks and the ships within them. Also the highest in singleton quantity, which meaning like non-stacked ships. It's also the highest in ship activations on logon. Also the highest in ship changed into events. And also highest in traded quantity. However, when it comes to traded value, it falls off the list and is replaced by some big boys, costing a little more. Orca coming in at 1. Now, if you look at gate jumps, the Astero is number 1, followed by the Venture and Tengu. Ships produced, the Trusty Rifter is number 1, all-time productions of ships. Mined quantity, the Retriever. Apocalypse, do people mine in this, or? Someone, all right. Characters, distinct character count so characters using ships for PvE. The Gila takes number 1, Ishtar number 2, and they swap roles when it comes to NPC kills in total. And for PvE bounties earned, the Ishtar stays in number 1. But for player-placed bounties earned, the picture is very different. The Loki takes top 1, Proteus follows. LP earned from PvP kills, the Thrasher is number 1, and then the Federation Navy Comet. Total PvP damage done goes to the Revelation. So big ship. But damage is not only important, but so is healing. So for remote hull repairing, The Archon is number 1. And remote armor repairing goes to the Nestor. And remote shield repairing goes to the Scimitar. For ship damage taken, the Drake is number 1. That's a lot to carry. But for ship deaths, ironically, the Drake falls down into 13th place and is replaced by the Catalyst. I wonder why that is. For PvP kill assists, the Munin is number 1, Drake number 2. PvP final blows, the Saber is number 1. But for kills in total, the Drake comes back on top. So not only the most damage taken, but also the most amount of kills collectively, both assists and final blows. Ship Isk lost while flying in a ship goes to the Gila, seconded by the Tengu. But most Isk lost, or Isk loss cost in PvP goes to the Tornado, all the way back to 2012. And to include it in one statistic, the coolest looking ship in EVEOnline, I dug up, the most wormhole collapses cost goes to the Megatron. Thank you. But that's it for me. There will be more data at Fanfest. We will have a booth in the trade hub. We'll be selling Concorde Capsuleer profiles, customized Concorde Capsuleer profiles for a little bit of money to support charity. We will have a data panel today at 12 in the panel room on the 2nd floor. And we will have a live data AMA, live data analytics with CCP Larrikin and CCP Estimate tomorrow at 10:30 on the 2nd stage. Do not miss that. But that's it for me. I have one video that I'm going to share in the end, which I hope is fully self-explanatory. If not, you can try to find me at the data booth or around Fanfest and ask me questions. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention. Enjoy Fanfest.